Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so just something fun today. I just noticed that a couple bigger comedians podcasts had some moments where they were right on the edge of making fun of the sort of right-wing strain of comedy and just society in general right now, and then backed off of it. And I thought it was funny because there's been a lot of drama circulating in the comedy world. It was like Andrew Santino was the one who had Mark Maron on the Bad Friends podcast, and he was talking all kinds of shit about Rogan and the Austin comedy scene, and that was something that blew up a lot. And Andrew Schultz was saying that he thought that was a bitch move to have Maron on to talk shit about Rogan, given that Andrew Santino and Rogan are friends. So all of this stuff is very petty, and it was just quick moments that were kind of exchanged on podcasts, but it blew up very fast because these guys are under a microscope at this point, and especially when it comes to tension involving the Rogan sphere down in Austin and whether other comedians are on board with that, because they kind of had a free pass in the comedy scene on their rise to prominence. The Austin scene, the comedy mothership, Kill Tony, switching to being in Austin instead of LA, as well as the Joe Rogan Experience. And now that they are a relatively dominant force in the comedy world, it's become more of a controversial thing. People are starting to push back on the right-wing angle, as well as just the vibe, the uncomfortable vibe of that scene of comedy. And you see sprinkles here and there, people saying what they really think about that comedy scene because they don't really care about having a good relationship with Joe Rogan. So here is Andrew Santino and Brendan Sagalow almost getting into the Austin comedy scene stuff, but you can see Andrew Santino kind of swerves and goes in a different direction, doesn't really seem to want to get all the way into that.
Seinfeld on Kill Tony?
Yeah.
What's up with these trans people? Get all these disabled weirdos out of here!
I honestly would love to hear what Jerry has to say about Kill Tony. He's like, so they just bring up people? And then they make fun of them?
Dude, Seinfeld on Kill Tony is such a good sketch. Seinfeld.
This next comedian is an assassin. From his 90s hit television show, Jerry Seinfeld. Put some fucking respect on his name.
Damn, dude.
Kramer would
that whole
also
scene
kill.
scares me.
What?
Kramer would also kill on Kill
Yeah,
Tony.
Kramer was ahead of his time.
Kramer. Don't put him in Cam Patterson.
Yeah, so that was Andrew Santino with Brendan Sagalow, who is another comedian that I've been paying attention to from the New York scene. And he's pretty funny most of the time. And here they're doing these impressions of Tony Hinchcliffe, and this idea of Seinfeld going on Kill Tony is funny just because he would never ever do that, and probably hates that show if he's aware of it at all. And when it comes to Andrew Santino, you almost get a little bit of genuine resentment in his impression there. There's something a little bit hostile about it, and it might just be the way it was delivered. He, I think, has been talking about how he's frustrated with the entertainment business in general, and the Austin comedy scene is really banging its chest right now in terms of being such a great place to do comedy, blah, blah, blah. So you have people from LA who are saying they're acting like it's so great down there, but it's not. LA is still one of the best places to be in the country, and New York is still one of the best places to be for comedy, and you can't really beat that. And I think, though, that when it comes to the LA scene, you're seeing a little bit less activity there than you're seeing in New York. New York is still pumping out a lot of talent. So I think there's a sense from Andrew that he's a little burned on the LA life in general, but also doesn't want to go down to Austin and doesn't fuck with that either. And he wants to talk shit about that scene and the vibe of it, but he also doesn't want to get into it because it quickly turns into internet drama. But you can also see that temptation a little bit with Andrew Santino to go there, as opposed to Shane Gillis, who gets a lot of goodwill in the comedy scene And even politically, people uphold him as like, this is a middle of the road guy who calls it pretty straight, because he's said some mildly critical things of Trump or of just the movement. But I think he's really just carved out a space for himself where he's very comfortable saying a lot of different things, and it only kind of piques the radar in rare occasion. So here's a moment with Matt McCusker where they talk about the quiet piggy moment with Trump, where he's kind of laughing about it and thinks it's hilarious, but then they start to get into the Epstein stuff because of that. Matt McCusker, his partner on Matt and Shane's Secret Podcast, he wants to get into the Epstein stuff, start talking about the details of it, and then Shane Gillis just fully swerves to another subject. So check that out.
Quiet piggy. I just remembered. I wanted to break that out. Sorry.
Wait, who got hit with a quiet?
Some fucking piggy on Air Force One got crushed by Donald Trump.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Do you think he's getting dementia?
I mean, I don't know. I don't think he just seems a little slower than usual, but
Spud thinks he's getting dementia. Spud said his daddy got dementia. Trump, meaning Trump Sr.
Yeah.
And there's speculation that T-Dog might be rocking Biden brains.
he's definitely not. He's not at Biden brains yet.
No, not yet.
But he's circling the drain.
Yeah, because
Quiet Piggy was fucking crazy.
it's pretty wild.
Although, if the allegations are false, I'd be furious too.
What was she asking him?
I think it was about Epstein.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a quagmire right now. The one guy who got busted, the guy who was the Harvard president and that sat on the board of OpenAI. Did you know exactly what his emails, what he was saying?
I was reading a lot of them. Yeah.
Did you about it, kind of using Epstein as like a dating coach?
I didn't see that one.
Yeah, he was apparently being like, I need a girlfriend. I'm married, but I need a girlfriend. Like, how do I talk? It was like kind of PUA shit. Like, how do I talk? How do I talk to these kids? Like, what are some tips?
How do I reach these kids?
He had to neg them. He had to be like, bro, your geometry's trash, bro. What's your SAT score?
His itch.
Yeah, that's tough stuff. That's the worst, to not only be associating with a pedophile, but also to be seeking romantic guidance.
I almost screamed to Quiet Piggy yesterday.
When?
I was ready to fucking explode, dude. I went to Starbucks and a woman in front of me. It's a pretty crowded Starbucks. It was
all right, so they
in
almost get into something interesting there. Shane brings up the Quiet Piggy thing, seemingly just because he wants to say it and laugh about it. And then he's the one who says he was talking about the Epstein files when he said that, which is true. But then once it goes further in that direction, he just fully swerves away. And I'm not exaggerating. For the rest of the podcast, they just talk about like mundane bullshit, like just being at the store and buying this or that, or how long it takes to do that. That's like the rest of it. And they immediately pivoted away from this Epstein thing. And you can kind of sense that the other guys, particularly Matt McCusker, takes the signal that Shane doesn't want to talk about that and that they should, go in a different direction with the pod. Probably just because he knows that if they get into politics for a while, people are going to jump on it and clip it all up. And I mean, here I am covering just that little section there. But also, again, he brought it up. And I think it's kind of coming back around. The cancel culture narrative is coming back around now, which people said already because of the Charlie Kirk thing. But I think more so, it's becoming more controversial in the comedy world to like take a stance on this like right-wing strain. And to be fair to Shane, he's done that a little bit and pointed out that the Austin scene is kind of lame. I think he still lives in Austin, or maybe he did and then he moved back recently. But he has talked about how living in Austin sucks, so he might still be down there. And he's been pretty honest in terms of, the way comedy has tilted and like not needing to say slurs all the time for no reason, etc. Except he still likes to flirt with that kind of shit, and it is frustrating to see these guys just how normal the Trump style behavior has become to them just because it's funny. And it can be fun to laugh at Trump, but I think it's weird when people don't get a bad vibe from that level of like abuse of power, you know what I mean? It can only come from having the same resentment toward whatever the target of that abuse of power is. And that's the thing that's annoying, because Shane Gillis is the kind of guy who could easily take the opposite stance against Trump in a situation like that if he was talking to somebody that Shane Gillis, agrees with. And that's the weird thing with this Epstein file shit. I don't know, letting him get away with that is just weird. And he says this thing about, but if the allegations are false, I would be pissed off too. And it's like, what allegations being false? His name is all over that shit. You know what I mean? There's really no allegations being tossed around that are false. There's a lot of speculation, but that's not happening on the part of this journalist. So, wanting to get away from it, I get it. That's not what he wants to talk about on his podcast, I guess. But I'm in the camp of, even if you feel like it's going to stir up a whole bunch of shit and a bunch of people are going to make their little videos about it, isn't that kind of like what you want to do? Isn't that the type of political speech and freedom that you guys have fought for? And it's exhausting. They can make a bunch of money just doing podcasts about nothing and doing stand-up comedy, especially in the position that Shane's in. He doesn't really have to get into the politics stuff. But I don't know. It seems to me that these comedians have fought for a certain political relevance. And when it's time to really drive the knife in, they don't seem to want to do it. And they all come to the same conclusions, whether it's the Rogan sphere or Trump. They're also talking a little bit about Trump kind of going senile here. And that's interesting because he specifically says he's not at Biden level yet, but he's circling the drain. So that's interesting to see that narrative beginning to crop up. But again, you just don't see him wanting to focus on that for very long because he still has an audience that's, heavily pro-Trump. And instead of trying to draw their attention to things that might change their mind and possibly have an impact, a positive impact on the discourse, they'd rather just kind of stay away from it and keep their noses clean and keep punching down. They're okay with continuing to punch down. And that's what they like about Trump, is that he punches down and then they can kind of punch down through him by laughing about it. But when it comes to punching up, once they really start to see the consequences of that and see that it's not without its turbulence, like, people are going to get mad at you, your friends are going to get upset at you, and they're going to go on podcasts and they'll be like, I think that was corny that he said that. And, you're going to have to stay strong in your stance. Shane Gillis has been one who shows a little bit more integrity in terms of how he handles things like the Riyadh Comedy Festival or whatever it may be. But at the same time, it seems like the elephant in the room is becoming the, Austin scene narrative kind of falling apart. And whatever comes next after that is going to be, I think, what most people want to gravitate to, because I think the cruelty of the Austin approach has worn thin very fast. And I think it's time for a reset button on that. But anyway, in terms of the Epstein files, just to get into that a little bit. So the bill has been signed to release the files. They still have a certain amount of time. I believe 30 days was the amount of time that was put on it for the DOJ to release something. At the same time, there have been court cases going back and forth about it. There was a judge who said that certain files shouldn't be released. There were judges who have contradicted decisions like that and said that files should be released faster. So we can definitely expect things to be tied up in the court system like that for a while. At the same time, there will probably be a major dump of files, I don't know, maybe the 20th or 21st next month. And so it's important to note that probably a major part of Trump being willing to release these is it being possible to redact as much of it that contains his name as possible, as well as other things that might preserve his interests. So I think when it comes to what gets released soon, we should expect that it's going to exclude anything that incriminates Trump and anything that includes this information about Epstein and Israel's relationship. Some of that is probably going to come out regardless, but especially in regards to specific spies and certain individuals that were tied with Epstein and Israel that might lead to deeper sets of conspiracies and whatnot. Some of that is probably going to end up being redacted, and that is the strategy that they're going with, that they have a certain amount of leeway, although a limited leeway, but still some, to redact people if there, is reputational harm and that sort of thing. Although part of the language of this law was written to prevent exceptions, but no doubt that's what we're going to see, and they have definitely redacted a heavy amount of material, including Trump, etc. already. So Dropsite News has put out a ton of great information about stuff that's in the files that we've already received. So if you want some detailed information about some of the stuff with more far-reaching implications, instead of just sort of the pop culture stuff that has been talked about a lot. People have talked plenty about Larry Summers and Michael Wolff, which, there's definitely implications there. But there are deeper conversations happening in these emails involving world leaders. Epstein was coordinating with Steve Bannon for quite a long time, up until like 2019. So that was through the entire time that Bannon was in the Trump White House. And there seemed to be situations where Epstein was trying to coordinate sort of like arrangements between world leaders, and particularly Israel, trying to set up certain firms and surveillance operations, make connections between people that could accomplish certain political goals. So that's the type of conspiracy that Epstein was just casually engaged with in his life, that they have gone to extensive lengths to cover up. Whether Trump's involved in that specifically, I doubt it, but his knowledge or involvement of this is likely tied up in the fact that it's been so difficult to get information about it. In other words, leverage might be being used against him when it comes to his cooperation with Israel. So as we see the continued consolidation of the media under figures like Larry Ellison, and using mouthpieces like Barry Weiss, who recently said that people should be listening to Alan Dershowitz more, another Jeffrey Epstein associate, they are going to try to reorganize the media landscape as much as they can to exclude this type of criticism of Israel and uncovering these type of conversations about essentially using leverage against the United States to pressure it into cooperation with Israel's interests and suppress information, commentary, and studies that were being done that suggested that that was the case. And so these comedians and many others, commentators, etc., are starting to put their finger on the pulse of Israel a little bit more. But they're also still so willing to take this culture war bait and do the punching down thing, and even turn the criticism of Israel into a punching down thing or a thing about Jews or whatever. And we've seen from organizations like the ADL that they're actually willing to put up with a certain amount of like culture war style anti-Semitism from people like Elon Musk doing the Sieg Heil, and even allowing the amount of Nazi discourse that he's allowed on his platform while still considering him an ally, because they're more focused on substantive criticism of Israel. So they're willing to collaborate with the right, even though the right is kind of actively building this more neo-Nazi base. And they're ignoring the more overtly neo-Nazi elements of that because they view criticism of Israel, substantive criticism of Israel related to the conflict that is most relevant to Israel right now, which is the genocide and all of the political and legal ramifications that are going to come from this point forward. Criticism of that and coherent commentary about that is much more of a threat to them than racism and anti-Semitism, actual anti-Semitism. So you can expect that to continue to be propped up in the mainstream culture, at least as long as this right-wing strain is currently in power. They will allow a certain amount of culture war racism in the accepted discourse, as long as criticism of Israel and documentation of their actions in Gaza are completely excluded. So going forward into the future, that's going to be the ball to keep an eye on. And the public figures, commentators, and comedians that are able to identify that are the ones who are really speaking freely and not afraid of what anybody thinks about it. By the way, my song Electricity, the one that plays at the intro of these podcasts, is now available on all streaming platforms. If you like that song, go stream it. I'm also posting a visual for that song on my YouTube page, so go there and listen to it. If you like that song, post a comment. If you don't like it, also post a comment, and let's run those streams up. Thanks for listening.
Too close to, too much to do. The mission is too crucial. Shout it out from the rooftops until I lose vocals. Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity.